Program now. Our first speaker is a true pioneer in cloud computing. When he was CTO of IT and CIO of the Ames Research Center at NASA, he co-founded the OpenStack project. And of course, OpenStack has had a huge impact throughout the cloud market and has now become a core part of many commercial products out in the market. Since leaving NASA, he's now gone on as the founder and CEO of Nebula. Today, he's going to discuss the emergence of the private enterprise cloud. Please join me in welcoming Chris Kemp, founder and CEO of Nebula.
Thanks, Steve. Cheers. Good morning, everybody. I can't believe I'm competing with a Rackspace party. Good to see everybody this morning, and it's great to see coming in HP, Rackspace, who else was on there? Red Hat, all contributing and sponsoring this conference, so I appreciate everybody's support. So today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what we are seeing out there in the enterprise and the adoption of cloud in the enterprise particularly. So today's talk is about the emergence of the enterprise private cloud. I'm just going to cruise through this. So basically, everybody should be doing this. Makes sense, right? The ability to be incredibly agile, to give your developers and your employees the resources they need when they need them. Big data explosion, cost pressures, right? I mean, every enterprise should be well into an adoption curve of cloud at this point, but they're not. And so really that's what that's what we're talking about today. So why? We're seeing the cloud being adopted in internet companies. We're basically seeing small companies not even consider building their own infrastructure, but immediately go to public cloud services. We're seeing startups. We're seeing SMBs. We're seeing the edges of large enterprises experimenting. We're seeing CIOs doing pilots. We're seeing all this activity and all this hype, but we're not seeing adoption in the enterprise. So as I talk about the emergence of the private enterprise cloud, I'm going to break it down a little bit. I'm going to first talk about cloud. And I want to just reiterate the definition that Peter Mell and the folks at NIST came up with. When we're talking about cloud, we're talking about on-demand, elastic, shared, metered by use, accessible services. We're not talking about taking yesterday's technologies and rebranding them cloud. And I think that might be part of the problem because a lot of enterprises have a lot of yesterday's technologies and yesterday's systems integrators that are largely responsible for the infrastructure that they've deployed. So when we talk about cloud in today's talk in the next few minutes, we're talking about true on-demand, elastic, shared, metered, accessible services. So private. I don't want to mince any words here. Basically, a public cloud is something that everybody can get to, and a private cloud should be basically the exact same thing, except behind the enterprise firewall, meaning it should have the exact same attributes, might be a little smaller though, but it should be on-demand, elastic, shared, metered by use, and accessible. So we're really talking about the exact same end-user characteristics, regardless of whether you're talking about a public cloud or a private cloud. And I think that's where we start to run into problems with the enterprise. Enterprises have all these challenges. As we talk to dozens of Fortune 50 CIOs and Fortune and Global 2000 CIOs, we found 5 themes that were really the underlying issues as their organizations grappled with making true cloud resources available to their employees. First of all, the culture, the maturity of the organizations that they were in. The ability for the existing culture, processes, technologies, tools, experiences, vendors, integrators to adapt to this new model where everything is dynamic and elastic, and that was really by far, above security, above anything else, the #1 barrier that these CIOs would talk about. Performance. Everybody has performance requirements in existing applications that don't always map to what you can do in a cloud environment where performance is typically less consistent. Security, obviously. Talked a lot about that at the conference here. Cost. You're going to hear from Alan over at Zynga about how the cloud was great. The cloud was wonderful. As their business grew, it became very expensive. And so especially if you have and can forecast your workloads, it's actually quite expensive to pay 10 cents a gigabyte. I mean, you do the math, that's $100 a terabyte, $1,200 a terabyte a year, $3,600 a terabyte over 3 years, the average lifespan of a $50 terabyte hard disk. So cost becomes a real concern at scale. And then architectural constraints. Existing applications often just don't like to run in cloud environments, and these architectural constraints are being increasingly addressed by public cloud providers. But what this leads to is a cloud paradox, which I call the enterprise cloud paradox. The enterprise cloud paradox is every attribute of cloud computing is in direct opposition to enterprise. So think about on-demand. Enterprises are on approval. I mean, arguably, enterprises define on approval. They've built complex workflows where multi-level organizational structures are required to approve budgets, to approve resources, right? So on-demand and on approval are opposed. Elastic, enterprises like to fix assigned resources to projects. They're the opposite of elastic. Shared versus private. I think the idea that a shared resource, accounting can use the same infrastructure that our public internet, that our marketing people, our salespeople use. This is kind of antithetical to how enterprises think about the infrastructure, where they like to isolate resources, whether behind firewalls, whether just physically isolate resources. It's all about isolation. I mean, we've been taught that this is how you achieve security, through isolation. Metered by use. Enterprises don't like to have things that are metered, that are unpredictable, that you can't budget for and plan for. They like to purchase things. If you look at the budgets of most enterprises, there's very little OpEx budget for infrastructure. It's all CapEx. Accessible is somewhat diametrically opposed to inaccessible. So, again, as you look at all of these attributes of cloud, there is a direct kind of antithetical paradox that exists in how typically enterprises like to do things. So that's the challenge with emergence. So how do you address this? And I think this is reflected in all of the different approaches that enterprises are using or are at enterprises' disposal to do cloud today. The public cloud, we've got great, innovative, incredible value propositions from companies like Amazon and Rackspace, but the challenge is with limited security controls, with the concern over lock-in, with high ongoing costs and with limited flexibility, enterprises look at these options and it's preventing emergence, right? Building custom private clouds, even if they call things, virtual private cloud, it doesn't get there. Building custom private clouds is hard, right? And we've always had the option to hire a great team of engineers and build these things ourselves with technologies from great companies like VMware and Citrix and Eucalyptus. But there's a lot of implementation risk. It's a big IT project. There's cost there. You have deep expertise you have to recruit to take these products and get hardware and software and network stuff to all work together to make these things true self-service, elastic, metered clouds. You also had the option to buy the solution. And, friends at VMware and Cisco and EMC will gladly partner together and give you a VCE solution. Increasingly, we're seeing companies take hardware and software and put them together as turnkey, quote-unquote, cloud offerings. The challenge is very expensive. You get locked in, and there's a high ongoing support cost. So I think these are the options that are available in the market today, and I think these are the options that are barriers to emergence of cloud in the enterprise. So how do you solve the paradox? That's the question. I think that you need to do 5 things. First, you need to support tens of thousands of employees with self-service provisioning tools and self-service management tools. And these are very different than what you might find in Amazon. I think Amazon's great for a web developer that needs some compute resources, storage resources, platform services. But think about the user experience that you would want to give a manager of that same employee, and it doesn't exist in Amazon. So I think you have to think very differently about how you would support elastic, dynamic, on-demand services in an enterprise. And a successful solution to this paradox from any of those vendors would support this notion of really employee-centric self-service provisioning and management tools. Second, supporting advanced security analytics and forensics tools, log analysis tools. I think this is something that's really missing in a lot of these solutions. Really seamless integration with the existing tools used today in enterprises to ensure compliance with various regiments of regimes of policy and security. And I think that's something that we're going to need to see in anything that emerges. Support for existing tools is another big piece. A successful emergent enterprise cloud will not introduce a single new management domain. And that's one of the challenges I think that a lot of vendors have in this space today. They bring new management domains in with the cloud. And so the network operations people, the security operations people that are achieving compliance through the tools and the processes and the people they've already trained look at this thing as a net new investment they need to make in learning and management and operations. The more we're able to integrate with the existing tools in these areas, the more we're going to see emergence in the enterprise. I think that cloud is all about economics. Not a single one of those attributes was a technology attribute. So unless we're able to show economic arguments to business units and users within enterprises, we're not going to actually see true emergence, because cloud will be an expensive cost center. Everybody's using it. It might be very internally efficient, but it won't be externally possible to provide that visibility back into the business units that are paying for it. Very few enterprises have successfully centralized IT. And I think increasingly, we're going to see enterprises struggle with that, because mission organizations are going to find it very hard to take services provided by the CIO and differentiate their businesses with them. And I think that as we see this, we're going to see an increased federation, and we're going to see business units attempt to try to do their own things. So I think unless those business units are able to understand the economics of the services they're consuming from some sort of enterprise cloud offering, it's not going to work, and we're not going to see emergence. I also think workload portability and infrastructure interoperability is key. I think any solution that threatens lock-in to any particular hardware or software, and in particular workload lock-in or data lock-in, is going to be fraught with challenges of adoption. And so I think a successful emergent cloud platform will support true workload portability. And I was reading, perhaps it was Randy Bias or one of the folks who was speaking here earlier today in this conference. One of the things we really like to see is standards evolve around virtual machine portability, virtual disk portability, virtual network portability between hypervisors and between cloud service providers. And I think that's really the key, and that's not happened yet. So I think the real solution to the paradox is an ecosystem. I don't think a single vendor or a single company can solve all these problems. And I think the attributes of that ecosystem to solve this paradox are it needs to be ubiquitous across enterprises and service providers. A platform will not emerge that locks workloads behind the firewalls of an enterprise. A real enterprise cloud scenario will almost certainly in the next 5 to 10 years involve bursting workloads out into clouds that are incredibly wickedly secure, incredibly reliable, incredibly well geographically positioned in different international locations close to customers. And I think workload portability, ubiquitous interoperability into these environments between enterprises and global service providers is an absolute key requirement of this ecosystem. I think open and standards-oriented platforms are the only way to ensure that portability. So I think unless you've got a platform that is driven by a community that desires portability and interoperability between competitive offerings, you're not going to see this. And I think also whatever platform emerges, whatever ecosystem emerges here, needs to support innovation. I think if we only take a small handful of companies that have been in the business of serving enterprises for the past 25 years, and we lock out all of the innovation that's happening in all of these great startups like Nicera and Joyent that are coming out of Silicon Valley, we're not going to see a platform that will be sustainable, because I think the most interesting things that are happening in cloud today are happening in companies that have fewer than 100 people. So this is where I get to be the co-founder of OpenStack for a second. I think the only platform I see out there today that has the potential of being this ecosystem that will truly crack this is OpenStack. And I'd like to be proven wrong. I see some great innovation, and I see some great work coming out of Microsoft. I see some great work coming out of VMware. But I think they're going to find it very challenging when you consider the implications, the ecosystems that they've developed, and the lack of innovation in their ecosystem, I think will ultimately create real challenges for them. So again, enjoy the rest of the conference here. Many of the companies that are driving this innovation, in fact, every single one of the companies that I saw here promoting this event are also promoting OpenStack and are members of the community, perhaps with 1 or 2 exceptions, but certainly appreciate their support and certainly look forward to the next few years. I think as I drive down Highway 101 5 years from now, we're going to see a completely different set of names on the buildings. And that is the potential of cloud. And I think that is the potential of the ecosystem that is emerging around OpenStack. Thank you very much.